everybody, it's Holly here today with another video for MarkerPop. Today we're going to be creating this card here. I am using the My Favorite Things Tiny Triangles background stamp, Blueprints 27, and this adorable set from W+9 called the Get Well Gang. So I'm going to be making a card that's similar to this card. It's not exactly the same. I'm going to change up the colors and make it a more feminine card. So I am going to say I had a lot of problems recording this video. All kinds of things were going wrong. So I started out coloring in the little mouse image first with distress markers, but my camera was not turned on. So that was our first problem. So anyway, so I do go ahead and color in the rest of the images. So I stamped all of the images I'm going to use onto some Canson watercolor paper using VersaFine Black Onyx ink. I let that dry for just a second, and then I went ahead and I'm coloring directly onto the image with the distress marker using the brush tip end. I'm just adding a little bit of color around the edges, and then I'm taking a slightly damp paintbrush and pulling the color from the area that I colored it on directly into the rest of the image to kind of give it a watercolored look. And then I'm going to do each image like that and lay down one layer of color, and then once that dries, I'm going to go back in with the same color. I'm going to scribble it onto my craft mat and then pick it up with the paintbrush directly and add some more color directly over it to kind of darken up the edges and add a little bit of shadows. Now for the mouse, I'm using the distress markers in Hickory Smoke for the body, Spun Sugar for the ears, and then for his nose area, I'm using Pumice Stone. And then I'm using a little bit of, what is this called? Tumbled Glass, just for the bandages. I wanted them to not look white. I wanted them to look stark white, but have a little bit of color to them. And since I used gray for the mouse, I decided to use blue as my little highlight there. And then on the dog above, I am using brushed corduroy and antique linen. And then I'm using the gathered twigs for the nose. And then the pillow is picked raspberry. The little pill bottle is carved pumpkin. The little mice are Hickory Smoke. And then I have two tissues there that I stamped out, and I just added a little bit of tumbled glass to those as well. And then once I have all the images colored in the way I like them, then I'm going to go ahead and cut them out using the coordinating die cuts. And you could do the same technique with the Zig Clean Color Real brush markers. The same technique, just use some Bristol cardstock or watercolor paper and color directly down onto the paper with the marker and then pull it out with the marker. And actually, I'm not using Canson watercolor paper here. I am actually using Tim Holtz Ranger watercolor paper with my distress markers. I had started out using a different piece of paper and I didn't like the way it looked, so I changed it up. So yes, I am using Tim Holtz watercolor paper with the distress markers because they work the best with the Ranger distress ink watercolor paper. They work best together because they're made for each other. So then I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and I'm going to dry it a little bit with my heat tool, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the die cuts and run it through my Big Shot. And then I'll be back and we'll start the background. So I have another piece of Ranger watercolor cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and use my anti-static powder bag all over the back. And I am working on the smooth side of the cardstock. And I'm going to add some embossing ink to that Tiny Triangles background. And then I'm going to put the cardstock down. And then I'm going to cover up or add some white embossing powder. And I'm just going to heat set that with my heat tool. And I'm using Hero Arts, just Hero Arts regular white embossing powder is what I'm using. But we do carry the WOW embossing powders in the store, and we have some of the Ranger embossing powders, but any white or clear embossing powder would work for this. And then I'm just going to heat set that, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to the background. So I'm going to take the mini distress inks, and I'm going to use picked raspberry, mustard seed, and spiced marmalade. And I'm just going to pounce them onto the Ranger craft mat there to make a little palette. And then I have a cup of water and a paper towel and a large paintbrush. So I'm going to go ahead and add some clear water to the background. And I'm doing these in brighter colors that are more feminine, you could say, because the other card was more masculine with the blues. But you could really use any color you want for this. You could change up the characters, make it for any holiday. So I'm going to add the mustard seed down first. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the picked raspberry. And then I'm going to add the spice marmalade at the top. And then I go back over it and kind of blend them in together. And I'm just going to heat set it. This layer I'm going to heat set. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a second layer to kind of brighten up the colors and make them pop a little better. And what I like to do is kind of bring in that middle color, that mustard seed, and blend that back into the raspberry and the marmalade. And then flip it around and kind of do it again. Kind of like when you're using an ink blender tool and you want to go back over your colors to help give you a better blend. That's what I'm doing here as well. And you can stamp these onto pretty much any piece of plastic. It doesn't have to be a craft mat. It could be a piece of plastic from your stamp set. It could be a acrylic block, whatever you want. You can make a palette out of. It's pretty easy. So then once I have the background the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat tool. And then I'm just going to rub over it with a clean dry paper towel, to pick up any of that color off of the embossed triangles that might be lingering on there a little bit, so they're really white and pop forward. You could also do this with some embossing paste. You could create the background and then use a stencil with some white embossing paste. That would have a pretty cool effect too. So I'm going to heat set that, and then I'm going to take a smaller paintbrush and flick some water onto the background. Then once I've got the amount of water drops that I want, just leave it sit for a second or two. You could also use a spray bottle or the Ranger Spritzer bottle to do this. And then I'm going to lay a clean paper towel over top of that. And that will help lift off some of the color and create more of a distressed background. Then I'm going to heat set it again one more time. And then I'm going to take the My Favorite Things Blueprints 27. And I'm going to use that center frame there that has the 3 window openings. And I'm going to die cut that using my Big Shot from a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. And I'm just going to run that through the Big Shot. And then when that's all done and I've die cut it, I'm going to go ahead and add some Scotch foam tape to the back of that. I took one piece of the foam tape and was able to cut it into 4 little strips. And I'm just adding that all over the back so they have some good support when I put that down onto the front of the card. And then I'm just going to line that up and center it on the center of that background piece. The background piece is 5.5 by 4.25. I didn't trim it at all. I used the pre-cut watercolor cardstock from Ranger. And then once I have that here down, I'm going to go ahead and position the little critters where I want them to kind of get an idea. And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment from the Get Well gang. I'm going to use the Get Well Wishes. And I'm going to stamp that in VersaFine Black Onyx ink onto another piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. And then I'm going to die cut it with that banner from the Blueprints 27. You could also die cut the banner first and then go in and stamp your sentiment if you wanted to. I like to do it this way because that way I can make sure I'm going to get that sentiment lined up or straight perfectly each time. And I did use the Mini Misty when I stamped my images onto the watercolor paper. So then once I have that die cut out, I'm going to go ahead and start assembling all the little pieces down onto the frame. Like I said, I just changed up the images. And I'm just positioning them in different areas so that it kind of looks like the other card as well. And I kind of like the way the pink and the orange and the yellow pop here. So once you have everything lined up where you want it, you're just going to glue and foam everything down. I added a piece of foam tape to parts of the images. And then I also added some of that Tombow Mono multi-glue to hold it and the bottom parts down onto the frame. And then on my other card, I used some gumdrops from Your Next Stamp. And on this card, I'm going to go ahead and use some sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. And I'm going to use the mix to add a little bit of sparkle to the card. You could also go in and add some clear Wink of Stella if you wanted. Then once I have all the images down where I want them, I'm going to go ahead and create a standard A2 size card base by cutting a piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of yellow cardstock in half. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold it at the top and add that. I'm going to use my ATG gun to adhere that watercolor paper. And I'm just adhering this directly onto the card. I'm not adding any foam, additional foam or anything, because there's some on the front there. So once I have that down and where I want it, then I'm going to go ahead and add those sparkling clear sequins. I like to use the mix because you get the different sizes and you can kind of figure out which one you want. And then once I have all the sequins on, I'm just going to use some Tombow Multimedium to go ahead and adhere the sequins. And then once I have them all down, that's going to pretty much complete my card for today. So thanks for stopping by, and you'll be able to see the pictures of both cards side by side. And I will see you again in 2 weeks with a new video for MarkerPop. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.